when I tell you these TikTokers are working with these celebrities behind the doors, behind the scenes, these celebrities is help funding these TikTokers, honey. And let me tell you, Colin, he have not forgotten about Nolan Wales. He have not gave up on Nolan Wales. He is working with several YouTubers, TikTokers right now to put the story out, the truth out. We are all working together. You got Al Sharpton and Ben Crump in the front lines. You got Colin and Tyler working behind the scenes. You got TikTokers on front deck, you know, telling us everything that they want to hide. I came across this, honey, and these TikTokers, they are revealing a dirty secret. And Colin Kaepernick knows all about this, and that is why he wants you guys to look at this, okay? Colin Kaepernick have helped this family. Colin Kaepernick want justice, and he's doing whatever he can to get it, okay? So he has not forgotten about Nolan Wales, and I'm pretty sure he's going to approve of this video. Check this out.
All right, after this, I'm probably going to take a couple days off because my brain needs a rest after the last couple of days. Now we know for sure that there was storage in the bow of the boat. All right, so now at this point, I am pretty sure that the Triton was there all day. They didn't switch out the boats. And I'm also pretty certain at this point that this is a real video because there's one single frame where you can see Bart's boat and you can also see the toes of somebody like dangling them off the water. So if the picture or video were AI, it would be a really bizarre thing for it to just kind of throw in. But there's zero question in my mind that this video has been altered. So then the question becomes, why would they alter this video? And the only thing that logically makes sense to me is to alter the identity of the two girls. Because if Carter is the boy in red, Wyatt is the boy in the American shorts, Bart's brother Brooke being the one in the navy blue shorts, and then Ike being the one in the teal shorts. Then we've got Warren up here with somebody in this red striped swimsuit and the girl in the teal swimsuit with the backwards hat. So in this picture, this would be Brooks, this would be Ike, this would be Wyatt, this would be Warren, which would leave this to be Carter. Now, whoever this is seems to be very cuddly with Carter. Like, too cuddly, in my opinion, for it to be like a mother or a family member. Thinking about it a lot from the timeline that we have been told. And what we haven't really been factoring in again is the party. Because remember, Warren said he went to the party, but instead of talking with all of his friends, he went upstairs to go talk with his girlfriend's dad. Now, those families are tight. So if that dad of Ava, if that conversation with the dad didn't happen, then they would automatically know that they were lying. So I've been saying for a while that the girl was somehow involved. And mind you, everybody's back on land now. They're getting ready to do the fireworks and everybody's swimming and drinking still, blah, blah, blah. So what's the excuse for no pictures at that party? They've explained it all away during the day, but at this point, they're all just being teenagers and having fun again, right? So I'm thinking that the brunette girl is Ava, the girl whose house they went to. And she's pretty close with Warren and the Pyrone family.
And they're full speed running. And then after that, I didn't see them anymore. I think you were on the boat. You start from there?
Yeah, so after we planed off, Wyatt kept the boat pinned the whole way in. We ran into the mouth of Fort Bayou, where we came from originally. And we turned into Fort Bayou, went in the channel, ran probably 500, 600 yards into Fort Bayou. Wyatt had jumped out of the boat, put the plug back in the boat so access water. So water didn't keep pushing and filling back the boat.
According to their own words, they went into the mouth and then they turned and they went about 500-600 feet. Now, mind you, the party house is right around, but they go past it and then loop back around. However, Warren just admitted that at some point they had to stop and Wyatt jumped in. And even then, you heard him stuttering over the story. Like, it wasn't a smooth transition because I think they dropped her off. Which would explain why they would go back to this party, because obviously they can't cancel the party. That looks really suspicious. Then my theory has always been that the guys all like broke off and like talked to the parents about what was going on, and that's when they formulated their whole we'll call her and then we'll call the Coast Guard plan. Remember, she is related somehow, I can't figure out, but she is related through marriage to the lieutenant that wrote up the very initial report we've seen. Because remember how Morgan claimed that the picture of the boat stuff was circulating around Snapchat and stuff, even though Christine didn't post it to her Facebook page until the next day. Listen to this.
His mom was, what was he wearing? And so We were trying to remember what color his shorts were. We couldn't quite figure that out.
I said black.
Yeah, I think we said
'Cause
black.
I really did. He was wearing navy blue shorts.
Yeah, it was like dark blue shorts.
Dark. I just said black because I was trying to piece everything together and help out.
And so at this point, we're freaking out. We don't know where our friend's at. And the girl that took the picture, she was like, okay, well, I just took this picture of today. This is what color swim trunks he was wearing. And his mom asked for that to post on Facebook to say, if you've seen him, whatever, this is what he was wearing.
So remember, the girl who took the picture with the digital camera was on Wyatt's boat at the beginning of the day and then was there with them at night when they were having this discussion. So she had to have been there at the beginning and at the party at the very least. Then we remembered that the original shorts picture, well, that wasn't the color of his shorts, as we now know. So we also know for a fact that this picture did not get sent to Christine until July 5th, meaning that they had to have had that picture and then not sent it to her for hours. Because they also said this.
And so that's what we sent to her, or that's what she sent to her, because we were just trying.
So they corrected themselves. He said, we sent it. No, she sent it. And on July 5th, Christine said that they have been up for almost 48 hours straight. And then the very next post above it are the same pictures, but better quality. Why did it take so long to get these pictures to them? Oh, and y'all, now that I said that, I realize, so all of these pictures had to come from the same digital camera, right? Meaning this picture did as well. And since I've already proven that this picture had used AI to do something weird because, you know, there was no little bar here, only explanation for using AI on just this little part would be to obscure the reflection that was in this poll of the person who was taking the video. Or the pictures. Oh my God, yes. That makes sense. Love it when I figure that stuff out in real time for you on camera. So it makes sense to me that this photo video thing was altered to cover up this girl's swimsuit. Because let's face it, this swimsuit is the ugliest thing. It has like supposedly like sleeves and it's a tankini, but it goes like in a weird cut, but it's ugly. It's ugly and it's clearly not what these debutante beauty queen girls are wearing to a 4th of July beach party. So I'm like 70% sure that this is Ava. Oh wait, oh my God. Wait a second. Shown y'all guys before that there's 4 boats out here, this little cluster, right? But I'm looking at these weird pink lumps and stuff at the front of the boat, Bart's boat here. Is that a pile of life vests? Because I'm realizing there's not 20, 30 people on all of these boats. Like I'm seeing 10, 12 people here tops. Let's not forget what a full house looks like on these boats. Because even in this video at the meetup place, there's not 20, 30 people getting ready to get on these boats. I mean, the boat left at 9:56 according to the GPS. We got like 7, 8 people here, like 6 people here. And also, if they were legitimately needing to be towed and they were trying to get the water to run off, why are they all spread out on the boat? Why are they on the boat in general? Why didn't they just get off on land or get on another boat? Trying to get the boat to tip up and go planing, why do you have over half the boat on the front of the boat? These are experienced fucking fishermen. They know better than that. Yeah, I can't believe I've never thought of that before. If the boat was sinking, why are they even on the fucking boat? Yeah, and if it was so common and so easy to get, you know, rides back with other people, you know, strangers on Horn Island, why did they need to load everybody on the boat? Or were they yelling at Nolan to get on the boat? They didn't need to get him on the boat. And now that I'm looking at this, doesn't it look like Warren is on the phone? Could this have been when he was calling his mom 8 times? Also, one more thing that stuck out to me.
We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time. After we left Jackson's house that night, I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this.
He stumbled over his words from beginning to end in that story, so I don't believe any of it. But the one thing that sticks out to me was the phrasing, they don't know anything about this. If people are heading over to your house, why wouldn't you call your mom and dad before you called 911? Because it sounded like he was trying to keep his parents out of the loop of this story, which as a teenage boy implies that you have something to hide. Just a lot of different things to think about, right?
On the island. When was that ever brought up? Why are they doing these podcasts? Like, what? Are you sure that the mom is a judge, or are you sure they have lawyers retained? Why are they doing these podcasts? Because if I'm your legal counsel, at no point would I be telling you that it is a good idea to talk about anything because there are literally cases being built right now. Anything they say, it can go into why are they doing these podcasts? Someone is clearly encouraging them to do this, and for whatever reason, it's not good. But this lets me know a couple of things. For one, these boys are definitely fighting this case in the court of public opinion already. The more public they can make it, the more times they can go out there and tell any story, the more times they can frame it as if they are just these 4 innocent little boys that went out with their one friend and they just don't know what went on. And the fact that people are trying to make this an issue is just, it's so terrible. It's so evil. They're fighting this case in the court of public opinion right now. It's so they can get ahead of any jury. I've said this before. This is what they're doing. They're trying to get ahead of juries. They're trying to get ahead of the selection that will take place. They're trying to get ahead of all of the stories that will be told when a trial comes and they have to pick a jury and people have their opinions. They're trying to get this out there already. This also tells me they weren't Nolan's real friend. They weren't. They absolutely were not friends with that young man. And I don't care how many different times they say they were, their behavior screams otherwise. They know what happened to him. They know. And that's why other stories keep changing. Or they're volunteering details that nobody asked for. Because like I said, who brought up dumping Nolan's body on the island? Who said that?
Well, the new audio came out from that Cito dispatch. I want y'all ass in jail. From Bart to Wyatt to that damn mom who was that judge. Yeah, I knew something happened to Nolan Wells. Look, in that Cito dispatch call, before somebody picked up, can we cover it up? You killed him. Is he already dead? Nolan, wake up. Look, damn it, Bart. I think Bart ass did it. That's what I think. Look, wake the up. They panicking. They need to be in jail by tonight.
You're about to get everything that's coming to you. But what's getting me is the fact that why is the internet solving this case before the sheriff's office? That's what gets me. Y'all were so quick to declare that there was no foul play. Just an accident. And look what we're turning up here.
There's things that seem weird there, and it's still, to me, you were in the location where his body was found, very close to where his body was found, and that's when you called for help, and your grandfather called to cancel help, and there were 7 people on the boat, and there's some commotion in the background, and it doesn't sit right with me. Like I said, boating culture, I don't know how you leave with 7 people in a boat full of water. And I also don't know how you leave with 7 people and not a boat full of water and end up not going very far because they were still right off the west tip and having a boat full of water. I need somebody to explain to me how that happened in calm seas with a boat that was operational when you loaded it.
Yeah, I heard he was drinking. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I heard he was drinking. Yes, baby, we all know he was drinking. If you actually look at like half of the photos from that day, he was holding a High Noon or some other type of seltzer in almost every other photo. We already knew he was drinking. Why are you now talking about it? What is the benefit of being, oh, he was heavily drinking that day? The better question is, who is providing alcohol to people who are 18, 19, maybe 20 years old? And from there, what role does that play in his murder? The question is, what happened to him and why did he not make it home when everybody else did? Not was he drinking or not. Who cares? A, we already knew that. And B, what's that got to do with anything? Y'all will not distract us from the truth and the reality of the moment. The question is, what happened to him? Not why did it happen? Not, well, what negative light could he have possibly been painted in to justify the harm that befell him? Shut up, girl. What happened to that baby? Why did that happen to that baby? Why is that the news y'all trying to push and not the things we heard on the audio? Not the fact that his mother is suing everybody and their mama trying to get as much paperwork as she can, as much documentation as she can to figure out what the heck happened to her baby. That's what we should be talking about, not he was heavily drinking. Oh, local teenager heavily drinks on boat and more news at 8.
Everyone connected to this case has spoken. Nolan's mother, in interview after interview, laying out her grief and her demands for transparency. His father, Elmore, in careful, specific detail about the night his son went missing, the friction over the keys, the runaround from law enforcement, the desperate search for answers. Warren Hudson has spoken across multiple sit-downs, defending his timeline and his actions. Javon Williams has appeared on national television, offering his own account of the last time he saw Nolan and directly disputing the idea that Nolan would have ever chosen to stay behind. Even Bart Edmondson, a young man who wasn't even part of the original friend group but found himself swept into the current, has gone on the record through his attorney to defend himself against false claims and describe the threats his family received. Everyone, except one person. Katie McCormack was the last person confirmed to speak with Nolan Wells before he disappeared. She has been named publicly for weeks. Her sister has spoken for her. Nolan's own mother has described a private, face-to-face conversation with her. And in all of that, in 6 full weeks of relentless national coverage, Katie herself has never given a single interview. She has never issued a single public statement. She has never once explained, in her own words, what actually happened on that beach. We are not here today to tell you why she hasn't spoken. We don't know why, and neither does anyone else outside her own family and her legal counsel. What we can tell you is what that silence has actually meant for this case. Because the one account capable of resolving its central contradiction is the one account nobody has ever heard directly. Today, we are laying out exactly what has been said about Katie by everyone except Katie, and exactly where that leaves this investigation. If you're new to Cold Case Watch Central, subscribe now, because today isn't about a shiny new piece of digital evidence or a frame-by-frame photo analysis. It's about the shape of a silence that has been sitting in the dead center of this case since its very first week. Let's start with who has actually spoken, because the contrast is the entire point. Christine Wansley has given extensive interviews to major outlets, describing in specific, granular detail the night her son disappeared. She has walked the public through the phone calls, the mounting panic, the frustration with law enforcement jurisdiction, and the devastating moment she finally learned her son's friends had his phone in their possession the entire time. Elmore Wansley has done the same, describing his own account of retrieving his son's keys, the inconsistencies he says he encountered that night, and the physical toll of searching an island for a child who wasn't there. Warren Hudson has spoken on camera multiple times. First in an early interview describing the boat, the mechanical failure, and his account of a verbal exchange with Nolan before the group left the island. He has since appeared in a joint interview alongside 2 other friends, describing what the past month has cost them personally, detailing the paranoia, the public confrontations, and the weight of being tied to a tragedy they claim they couldn't prevent. Javon Williams has spoken directly to major networks, offering his own account of the last time he saw Nolan, and directly disputing the foundational premise of the defense, that Nolan would have casually chosen to stay behind on an island as the sun went down. Even Bart Edmondson, whose actual role in this entire story amounts to helping tow a distressed boat, has had his attorney speak publicly and repeatedly, correcting a viral false claim that spread about him and describing the credible death threats his family received as a result. Every one of these people made a choice at some point over the past 6 weeks to speak publicly about what they know, what they remember, or what they believe. Some of those accounts, as we've covered extensively in previous broadcasts, directly contradict each other, but every one of them exists on the record. In that person's own words, Katie McCormack's account exists differently. Here's what has actually been reported, and it's worth being incredibly precise about the difference between these 2 categories of information, because they have been treated as interchangeable online, when they genuinely aren't. The Daily Mail identified Katie McCormack, 19 years old, as the young woman named in the friend group's account of that afternoon. But that reporting didn't come from Katie herself. It came from her sister, Gracie McCormack, who gave a direct, on-the-record quote. Katie had a conversation and assumed that Nolan was getting ready to get on the boat he came out on, Gracie said. Katie assumed the friends, who were telling him to get on the boat, wouldn't have left him. Notice, again, exactly whose words those are. Gracie's, not Katie's. It is a sister speaking on her behalf, relaying what she says her sister told her in private. Separately, Christine Wansley has described a private, face-to-face conversation with Katie directly. According to Christine's own account, Katie told her that when she and Nolan said their goodbyes, he told her he intended to head back and rejoin his friends. That is the closest thing to Katie's own account that has ever reached the public, and even that arrived filtered entirely through Christine's retelling of a private conversation, not through anything Katie has said publicly herself. 2 second-hand accounts. A sister's relay, and a mother's retelling of a private conversation. That is the complete universe of what is publicly known about what Katie actually experienced that afternoon. There is exactly one instance of Katie's own words appearing anywhere in this case, and it wasn't about Nolan's death at all. According to reporting on the case, when a social media post came out defending her against online speculation, Katie responded directly, briefly, in her own words. "I'm good, and all I can do is pray for healing over them," she wrote. "This is a terrible situation, all in all." That's it. That is the entirety of Katie McCormick's own public voice in this case. 6 weeks in, 11 words of gratitude for someone defending her, and a general expression of sorrow. Nothing about the conversation itself. Nothing about what Nolan said to her, or what she said to him. Nothing that confirms or clarifies anything about the central contradiction that has defined public understanding of this case since it began. That contradiction is worth stating plainly, because it is the entire reason Katie's silence matters as much as it does. According to the friend group's consistent, repeated account, Nolan chose to stay behind specifically to continue talking with Katie, telling his friends to leave without him. According to Gracie's account of what her sister told her, Katie believed the exact opposite, that Nolan intended to get back on the boat with the group. Attorney Ben Crump has addressed this contradiction directly and bluntly. "She's saying he went to get on the boat," Crump has stated. "They're saying he didn't get on the boat. Somebody must not be telling the truth." Sit with that sentence, because it's doing something incredibly important. Ben Crump isn't saying anyone is definitely lying. He's identifying that 2 accounts exist, that they cannot both be fully accurate as currently stated, and that resolving which one holds up would meaningfully move this case forward, and the one person who could actually resolve it definitively, in her own words, is the one person who has never spoken. We want to be very careful here, because it would be easy to let this observation slide into something it isn't. This isn't an accusation. Katie McCormack has not been named a person of interest by any investigator. Nolan's own family has publicly expressed support for her, not suspicion. According to Gracie, Katie has fully cooperated with investigators throughout this entire process. But cooperating with investigators privately and speaking publicly are 2 completely different things. And choosing the first while declining the second is not, on its own, evidence of anything except a choice. There are entirely legitimate, respectful reasons a young woman in her position might make exactly that choice. Her attorneys, if she has retained them, may have advised her directly against public statements. The exact same advice given constantly to witnesses and peripheral figures in cases far less publicized than this one. Speaking publicly once creates a permanent record that can be picked apart, quoted out of context, and revisited endlessly by people who were never interested in fairness to begin with. Every other person who has spoken publicly in this case has experienced exactly that. Warren Hudson has described threats and public confrontations. Bart Edmondson's family says he received a credible death threat serious enough for FBI involvement, tied directly to a false claim built around a misidentified photo. Even Nolan's own mother has described being the target of an anonymous professional complaint to her nursing board that was ultimately dismissed as baseless. If Katie has watched every other named person in this case absorb that exact kind of consequence for speaking, staying silent isn't hard to understand as a rational, protective choice, rather than something requiring a darker explanation. That's the fair version of this. Here's the version that's harder to simply set aside. The specific contradiction at the center of this case, whether Nolan intended to stay or intended to leave, sits in a conversation that only 2 people were actually present for. One of those 2 people is gone. The other has never spoken publicly about it in any format in 6 weeks. Every other detail in this case, the GPS timeline, the CTO call, the friend group's accounts, the enhanced photographs, exists because someone was willing to put their name on it publicly, for better or for worse. This one detail, arguably the single most consequential conversation in the entire case, exists only in the second-hand retelling of two other people. That's not proof of anything specific. It's a genuine structural gap in the public record, sitting exactly where the case's central contradiction lives, and it has remained unfilled for 6 full weeks, while nearly everyone else connected to this story has stepped forward. It's worth asking what would actually change if that gap ever closed. If Katie McCormack ever did give a direct, on-the-record account in her own words of that final conversation, it wouldn't necessarily resolve the entire case. It wouldn't tell investigators how Nolan actually died, or what happened to him after he and Katie parted ways. What it would do is close the specific, narrow contradiction Crump has pointed to directly. It would tell us, with far more confidence than a sister's second-hand account or a mother's retelling can provide, exactly what Nolan said in his own words in the last conversation anyone has described him having before he disappeared from the public account entirely. That's worth something, whether or not it resolves the bigger mystery. Closing that one specific gap would remove one entire category of dispute from a case that has generated an overwhelming amount of noise, built on exactly this kind of second-hand uncertainty. Think about how many separate threads in this case trace back directly or indirectly to that unresolved conversation. The friend group's account of Nolan staying behind, Katie's account, relayed through Gracie, of him intending to leave, the theories built around both versions, the public arguments over which account should be believed. All of it circles back to a handful of words spoken between two people on a beach in the final confirmed conversation of Nolan Wells's life. And the only person who could actually settle it definitively has said nothing. We're not going to speculate about what she would say if she ever did speak. We're not going to guess at her reasons for staying silent. And we're not going to treat that silence as suspicious, just because it's the only piece of this puzzle that hasn't been filled in yet. What we are going to do is name the gap plainly, the way we've tried to name every other unresolved thread in this case, without inflating it into more than it actually is. Everyone else has spoken, his mother, his father, his friends, the young man who was falsely accused because of a photo. Even the attorneys representing every side of this story have given multiple interviews in a case that has generated an almost unprecedented amount of public commentary, from national civil rights leaders to local sheriffs, to random strangers online, claiming to have solved it themselves. One voice, arguably the most important one, has never once entered that conversation directly. And while that silence holds, another narrative has been quietly taking root. A narrative designed to shift the focus away from the unanswered questions and place it squarely on the victim. We've seen this before. Pattern recognition is a powerful tool in true crime, and we have seen this playbook executed time and time again, especially when tragedies involve the Black community. After the death, the smear campaign begins. The subtle, insidious shift in the media's focus. What can we find out about this person? What can we say to make this easier to swallow? If you were in Christine and Elmore's situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people consuming your worst nightmare, casually typing out, "Well, you know, he was at an island. He was heavily drunk." Because that is the narrative that has been pushed from the very beginning. Oh, he was sloppy drunk. But was he? Or is this a narrative being manufactured to make the public accept a tragic, accidental drowning without asking the harder questions? Christine Wansley has spoken directly to this. She has spoken with adults who knew Nolan very well, coaches who were out there on the island that day. One coach in particular told Christine he saw Nolan somewhere between 2:45 and 3:30 p.m. They talked for a while. They talked about college. They talked about his life, his plans for the upcoming football season, and according to that coach, Nolan was perfectly fine. He was coherent. He was present. It bothered that coach, too, that this narrative of a sloppy, incapacitated teenager had taken over the story. Because if Nolan was heavily intoxicated, if he was a danger to himself on the water, then the tragedy becomes a cautionary tale about underage drinking. It becomes an accident that nobody could have prevented. It absolves the people who left him there. But if he wasn't, if he was standing on the beach, making plans for his sophomore year, perfectly capable of getting on a boat and going home, then the question changes entirely. The question stops being, how did a drunk boy drown? And starts being, why did an 18-year-old athlete who knew how to swim end up face down in the water while his friends sailed away? The drinking narrative is a distraction. It's a smokescreen designed to blur the edges of the timeline. Because even if he had been drinking, even if he had a seltzer in his hand in the photos, it doesn't explain the missing phone. It doesn't explain the altered photographs. It doesn't explain the shifting skyline, the missing safety rails, or the impossible physics of a sinking boat where the passengers lounge on the bow. And it certainly doesn't explain the silence of the last person to see him alive. Here's where this actually leaves the case today. The sealed autopsy remains sealed. Toxicology remains outstanding. The grand jury has not yet convened. And the specific contradiction at the center of Nolan's final confirmed hour, whether he intended to stay behind or intended to leave, remains exactly where it's been since the beginning, resting entirely on two secondhand accounts of a conversation only two people actually had. If Katie McCormack ever does choose to speak in her own words about what was actually said between her and Nolan that afternoon, that's the moment this specific thread finally closes. Until then, this remains what it's honestly been since the first week of this case. Not a mystery about who's lying. A gap in the exact place where this case's central contradiction lives. A gap that only one person has the ability to actually fill, and hasn't. We'll be here the moment that changes. The same way we've been here for every other development in this case. Laid out with the same care we gave it today. After watching the breakdown, what stands out to you the most? The shape of Katie's silence, or the push to label Nolan as sloppy drunk to justify the drowning? Drop your theory below. If you want coverage that respects the evidence and honors the families, subscribe to OB Crime Stories and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And before you click away, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell us exactly where you are watching from today.